girls, so we are starting a new unit. The new unit is called Anatomy and Physiology in Health and Social Care. So I'll be honest with you, it is quite wordy. You're going to be looking at lots and lots of new key terminology that you haven't been introduced to before, so it will be quite tricky. So I want to take it nice and slowly. I'll be using the videos because I think sometimes you guys can engage that a little bit more if you can see me. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking through what this unit entails. So it's actually an exam unit, so you will be taking this exam ideally in January. It's out of 90 marks, so it is quite a big paper. Throughout the paper there are lots of different questions, and they range from 2-mark questions all the way up to 8-mark questions. And there are 3 different learning aims. You've got learning aim A, learning aim B and learning aim C. Learning aim C is the smallest and it's just looking at data, whereas learning aim A is looking at the way our body functions and learning aim C is looking at the different systems within our body. Last week you had the task of researching some of the body systems. We did that so that you had a really basic understanding of what they all are. Now I'm going to talk through you very briefly what we will be learning about throughout this unit. So I'm going to talk you through learning aim A, B and C. So with learning aim A, we will be looking at cells, tissues, organs, energy and genetics. That means we're going to be looking at cell structures, we're going to be looking at the way that muscles are built up, what the structure of muscles are. We're going to be looking at different organs and the role that they play within the body, how we get energy, how we produce energy, and we will also be looking a little bit at genetics. Learning aim B, as we should already know because we've done our research, we are looking at all of the different bodily systems. So you've got your homeostatic mechanisms, your cardiorespiratory system, musculoskeletal system, digestive and renal. I've put those 2 next to each other because they link quite closely. We've got our central nervous system and our endocrine and immune and lymphatic system. Our endocrine system, as most of us were able to point out, is where our hormones are. It's the system that controls our hormones. And then very lastly we have learning aim C. Now learning aim C is very straightforward. It's simply looking at data and how we can use data to get a better understanding of our anatomy and our physiology. What I want us to now move on to is looking more specifically at today's lesson. So we're going to get the ball rolling, we're going to start right away, and we are looking at cells. So by the end of this lesson, I want you to know what a cell is. I then want you to be able to identify the components that make up a cell structure. Normally, we would start our lesson with a memory platform. We obviously haven't done anything yet, so we're going to do a slightly different memory platform. I've got 3 keywords for you here. The first keyword is cells, the second keyword is tissues, and the third keyword is organ. I'm going to tell you what the definition is for each keyword. You write the definition down, then you are going to give yourself 3 minutes to copy those definitions, cover them, and then see if you can rewrite them correctly so that you are getting those words embedded into your key vocabulary. So the first word that we are going to be looking at is cells, and the definition of cells: they are the basic units of living material. Second one that we're going to be doing is tissues. Now tissues are a group of cells that are joined together to carry out a particular task. An example of a tissue could be a muscle. Ooh, throwing that one out there. And our third and final keyword is an organ. Now an organ is a collection of tissues joined together to carry out a specific function. So give yourself 3 minutes. I don't mind if you want to pause this, turn it off, whatever, however you do it, it's entirely up to you. But give yourself about 3 minutes, get those 3 terms copied down, then 1 minute on each, testing yourself so that you know that vocabulary. Every single person on this planet is made up of billions and billions of cells. Each cell is there because it carries chemical reactions and processes throughout the body. Cells don't normally exist on their own, and they normally exist in little groups of similar cells. So an example of this would be something like a red blood cell. One red blood cell on its own wouldn't do much, so there's a collective. When they are all together, they create something called a tissue. So an example of that would be red blood cells collating together to form blood. Once you've got lots of tissues that are similar and they connect together, they then create things called organs. But you should know that already because you've just got all of those written down as key terms. Most cells, sorry, I'm just reading my notes. Most cells are so tiny that you can't see them, and we know that already. A lot of what we're going to cover now is probably what you've already done in Key Stage 4 science, but we're just going to look at it in a little bit more detail. And I also want to refresh your brains, seeing as I know that you haven't done it for a whole year. So most cells that we have in our bodies are so small that you can't see them. And in those instances, you need a microscope or an electron microscope. The only cell that is big enough for us to see with the human eye is the ovum, which is one of the female reproductive cells. So what I want us to go over is the structure of a cell. Now, you can see that I've put on here the ultrastructure of a cell, and that means what is beyond considered normal. So because the structure of the cell is so small, and it can only be seen with immense magnifying, it's therefore called the ultrastructure of a cell. So the first part of that cell that we want to look at is our cell membrane. So you probably know this, like I said, from Key Stage 4 or GCSE science, and the cell membrane is like the wall of the cell. So we're going to go into that with a little bit more detail, and what I want us to think about is the structure of that membrane. So if I pulled that membrane out, I looked at that under a microscope, what would it actually look like? So the first thing that I need you to know is that the cell membrane is made up of a phospholipid protein, and that is like a fatty protein. There's two different types of fatty proteins in there, and they sit on two layers, one on top of another, like so. So I'm just going to use, let's go for a purple colour. I'm going to use purple just to show you what I'm on about. So this part here is one layer, and this part here is the second layer, and we can see here that this is the layers of the phospholipids. Just checking my notes. Okay, so due to the shape of the cell membrane, due to the shape of it, you can see that it's got lots of almost like tiny little balls that are joined together like this, and this is all of those phospholipids joining together. Those are called phosphate heads. Now the role of those as a phosphate head is to act like a receptionist. So if you think at Lambeth Academy, you know you've got Miss Johnson, she is our receptionist, and if anybody comes in, they sign in with her. That's what your phosphate heads do. So if there is a watery substance like a hormone that's trying to penetrate into the cell membrane, the phosphate heads are the first thing that they'll come into contact with, and they will just kind of allow it to pass through or won't allow it to pass through. So before we move on, I just want us to recap. This is looking specifically at the cell membrane. So this is that outer layer of the cell. I'll just draw it very, very, very badly. You know how bad my art skills are, girls. That's the cell membrane on the outside of the cell. Now that's broken up, and if we looked at that through a microscope, there would be two layers. Those two layers are made up of phospholipid proteins. With those two layers, you've got like little receptionists that run the whole way along the outside of that cell membrane, and they allow for other substances to pass through the cell wall if need be. Okay? The cytoplasm is the gel-like consistency which is on the inside of the cell membrane. It's actually where all of the chemical reactions will take place within the cell, and there's a term for that. That term is called the metabolism. And that is the sum of reactions happening within the body. All I need you to know though is that the term for chemical reactions taking place within the cytoplasm is called the metabolism. Another little fun fact for you, because I know this is so exciting for you all, that fun fact is that there are sugars and glycogens that are stored within the cytoplasm, and one of those is pigment. So where you get your skin colouring from, that sits within the cytoplasm. The The biggest structure within a cell is the cell nucleus. So our nucleus is like the brain power of the cell, and most cells only have one nucleus. However, if a cell has two or more nucleus, it's called a multinucleate, and that means that there is more than one nucleus within that cell. With that in mind, there are also some cells that don't have any nucleus at all, and they are called anucleate, which means there is no nucleus. An example of a cell that does not have a nucleus at all would be a red blood cell. While still thinking specifically about the nucleus of a cell, what I want us to do is learn three key terms. With these three key terms, I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about what a nucleus does and how it functions. So the first phase that I want us to talk about is the interphase. Now the interphase is just while the cell is normal and it's resting. So if we take a look at this diagram here, I think I'm going to go for green this time. If we take a look, we can see that we've got these strands. These strands are part of the chromatin network. Now you're thinking, Miss Anderson, what on earth is the chromatin network? You've all heard of chromosomes before. The inside of that nucleus while it's resting just means that there is the presence of chromosomes. So we know that interphase means the cell is resting and that there is a sticky mass, it's a dark mass, and that is the chromosomes that are inside that nucleus. The second phase that I want us to know about is synthesis. This means that the cell splits and it replicates, so there's two doubles of whatever it was. And the third and final phase that I want us to know, and this one we do need to understand in a little bit more detail, is mitosis. Now mitosis is when the cell divides and it makes two cells, so it splits. Just checking my notes, give me a second. So when this takes place, so when mitosis takes place and the cell splits, it's actually the chromosomes. So if we go back and we remember the chromatin network, it's those chromosomes that are splitting and then creating two cells, okay? Please, can you go through these hinge questions independently? Just read the question and then answer it in your books. Once you've come to your answer and your decision, then go to the next slide. Finally, I want to firstly thank you guys for joining in and getting involved in the lesson. Secondly, I want to give you guys a bit of direction so that you can get to the Microsoft Forms. So all I need you to do is click on this link here. Here's one I made earlier. Click on the link and then just answer the questions. Please, 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 please make sure you go through this and spend a little bit of time on each question. I know I've given you an absolute load of information today, so I want to make sure that we've got it, and the bits that we haven't got, I can then go back and redo. So give it your best shot, guys. Thank you very much for getting involved today, and I will be hearing from you very, very soon. Thank you, and good luck.